Imagine this. You're 20 years old, full of dreams and promise, drifting off to sleep in a cozy motel room with your mother, while not feeling well. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door. 2 people claiming to have been in an accident are on the other side. When you open the door, they push themselves in, and a hand clamps over your mouth. A rag soaked in chloroform steals your breath, and darkness swallows you whole. When you wake, you're trapped in a wooden coffin just 18 inches underground, with only a thin mattress, a bucket for a toilet, cans of chicken broth, not knowing if you will survive. This wasn't a nightmare. It was the horrifying reality for Barbara Jane Mackle on December 17th, 1968. Welcome to Trending Docket, where we dive deep into the cases that grip the nation. I'm Michelle, and today we uncover the chilling tale of Barbara Mackle, buried alive for ransom, surviving 83 agonizing hours in the Georgia woods. Buckle up, listeners. Her story is a testament to human endurance that will leave you breathless. To understand the terror of Barbara's ordeal, we first need to know the woman at its heart. Barbara Jane Mackle was born on March 16, 1948, in Florida, the cherished daughter of real estate developer Robert Mackle and his wife Jane. The Mackles were no ordinary family. They were titans of Florida's post-war boom, building massive subdivisions like Inverrary and Lauderhill and Century Village retirement communities. Robert's empire made them multimillionaires, placing them squarely in the sights of criminals hungry for a big score. By 1968, that $500,000 ransom demand, equivalent to about $4 million in today's dollars, wasn't just a number. It was a fortune that screamed opportunity in an era of economic disparity. Barbara herself was the picture of youthful vitality. At 20 years old, with shoulder-length auburn hair, striking green eyes, and a warm, approachable smile that lit up a room. She was studying at Emory University in Atlanta. Her mother, Jane Mackle, 47 at the time, described her daughter as vibrant and trusting, always ready with a laugh or a kind word. The family was close-knit. Her mother picked her up early for break because she was not feeling well. They stopped overnight at the Roadway Inn. Little did they know, their wealth had painted a target on their backs. Barbara's privileged life, summers at the family estate in Vero Beach, holidays filled with love, made her the perfect victim for a plot straight out of a thriller novel. But behind the glamour, she was just a young woman excited for the holidays, unaware that her world was about to collapse into suffocating darkness. It was around 4 a.m. on December 17, 1968, when evil intruded on their peace. Barbara and Jane had checked into their room 137 at Roadway Inn, a modest 2-story motel bathed in the neon glow of Atlanta's bustling suburbs. Jane later recounted drifting off while watching Johnny Carson on TV. That's when the intruders struck. 2 figures, 1 man and 1 woman, knocked on their door. They claimed they needed help because they had just been in a car accident. Jane opened the door to a man armed with a shotgun and a woman with a ski mask on. They forced a chloroform-soaked rag over both women's faces. Jane passed out quickly. They tied her up and grabbed Barbara and took her to their car. When Jane woke up, her daughter was gone. She was able to free herself and call the police. But by that time, Barbara was already 30 miles away, not knowing what awaited her. The kidnappers, Gary Stephen Christ, a 23-year-old drifter and ex-con with a chiseled jaw, sharp features, and a history of theft, and his accomplice, Ruth Eisenman Shear, a 26-year-old Honduran with short, light color hair, piercing eyes, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and 110 pounds, had meticulously planned this. Christ had posed as a student to scout Emory students from wealthy families. They had everything set up prior to, and even practiced taking pictures with the Polaroid camera, making sure it worked properly. According to FBI documents, on December 12th, before leaving Miami for Atlanta, Christ buried a 4-page Xerox-typed ransom letter in Mr. Mackle's garden. It explained that Barbara was buried alive and only had 7 days to survive. The note requested $500,000 in $20 bills. On the day of the kidnapping, they bundled the sedated Barbara into Christ's car and drove her 30 miles northeast to a wooded area off U.S. Highway 29 near Lilburn in Gwinnett County. There, in the pre-dawn chill, they lowered her into a custom plywood box, 6 feet long, 23 inches high, and 23 inches wide, reinforced coffin. Inside, a thin mattress, blankets, food that would give her enough nutrition for a couple of days, and water. Barbara didn't know that the water was laced with sedatives, so she would not panic. The kidnappers also left written instructions for her on how to use the ventilation system, sump pump, and light in the makeshift coffin. For 83 long hours, Barbara tried to remain calm. Barbara was told by her kidnappers she would be monitored every couple of hours, but that was not true. After they were done screwing on the lid to her coffin, they went back to the hotel to clean up and check out. After that, they made their ways back to Miami. The claustrophobic horror, sweat dripping, lungs burning, the weight of the earth pressing down, defied imagination. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a live burial for profit. On the way back to Miami, Christ and Eisman stopped and called the Mackle residence. They told the house guest that answered the phone where to find the ransom note. By 3 a.m., Christ and Eisman were back in Miami. Before they went home, Christ mailed out Barbara's gold ring and the Polaroid picture of her. The Polaroid was of her laying in the coffin with a sign that just read, "Kidnapped." Later, on the afternoon of December 18th, Christ stole a small motorboat from his job. He was going to use the boat to pick up the ransom. The next morning, on December 19th, Christ called Mr. Mackle directly and gave him the instructions for the ransom drop. Based on the FBI files, quote, Mr. Mackle has to leave his residence alone immediately at 1:45 a.m. with the suitcase containing the $500,000 ransom money. He was to go to Bay Road and Fair Isle Street, where there is a pedestrian bridge that would take him over Biscayne Bay in Fair Isles. He would then go to the 4-foot wall that prevented vehicle traffic. Mr. Mackle would see a blinking light as he walked toward the wall. The blinking light would be affixed to a large box just over the 4-foot wall. End quote. Mr. Mackle got confused and was not able to find the box, so he just placed the suitcase with the ransom money on the 4-foot wall and left. Eisman, who was the lookout, watched Mackle and saw that he was off course. Christ moved in with the boat that he had stolen and saw that the light was not working, but he did locate the suitcase with the money. After retrieving the money, Christ took the boat back to the park where he got out and started his walk back to his car that he had parked. As he got closer to the car, Christ noticed a police car with 2 officers looking around and into the car. Christ got scared, dropped the suitcase, and ran. One officer chased Christ, firing a couple of shots at him because he was armed, but Christ was able to escape. The other officer picked up the suitcase that contained the ransom money. That would be later returned to Mr. Mackle. After the money was returned, Mr. Mackle made a plea to the media for the kidnappers to tell him where his daughter was. And it worked. At 5:30 p.m., Christ called a priest at Epiphany Church and told him to get Mackle's personal number and tell him to have the ransom money ready because he will call back at 11 p.m. At 10:35 p.m., Christ, after renting a car, called another priest, Father Mulcahy, with the directions for the second attempt. The following morning, Mr. Mackle was able to make a successful drop-off of the ransom. At 12:55 on that same day, Christ called the Atlanta FBI office from a payphone. He told the switchboard operator that he was Barbara Markle's kidnapper, and she needed to write down the location of her burial site carefully and not transfer him to an agent. She did, and 50 agents were dispatched to the scene, but in the excitement of it all, they forgot to bring a shovel. After a couple of hours of searching, they found an area of disturbed soil. They started calling Barbara's name, and she started thumping on the lid. The agents found her location, and with their makeshift tools, they dug her out and opened the lid to her coffin. Barbara was weak, dehydrated, but alive. According to FBI Special Agent J.W. Sanders, who led the ransom surveillance, quote, "We knew we had to move fast. Every hour underground reduced her chances. The air tubes were our only hope. She couldn't last much longer without fresh oxygen." End quote. At 4:23 p.m., after 83 hours and 6 minutes, rescuers, FBI agents, and Gwinnett County deputies dug frantically with their makeshift tools and bare hands. Barbara, dehydrated and hypothermic, but alive, gasped, "I'm hungry," as they lifted her out. According to Barbara herself in her 1969 memoir, 83 Hours Till Dawn, quote, "I heard them calling my name through the dirt. It was like a miracle, the voices of angels pulling me from hell," end quote. The kidnappers didn't evade the FBI for long. Christ was arrested December 31st in a Florida swamp during a high-speed boat chase. Eisman, the female accomplice, was arrested months later when her fingerprints triggered an alert. Eisman was applying for a job at a hospital and submitted her fingerprints for a background check. Christ got life in prison. Eisman was sent back to Honduras. According to retired Gwinnett County Sheriff William A. Peavy, quote, "Barbara's survival was against all odds. Most would have suffocated in half that time. It was sheer will." End quote. Christ would only serve 10 years of his sentence before being paroled. He would later move to Indiana, where Christ became a licensed practitioner years later. Barbara Mackle's story isn't just a crime. It's a raw portrait of resilience amid unimaginable terror. She recovered fully, married years later, and went on to have kids of her own. Barbara led a quiet life, not making many public appearances cites her ordeal. Her 83 hours remind us of the fragility of life and the power of hope. If this grips you, you can dive deeper. Read her book, 83 Hours Till Dawn, by Barbara Mackle. Thank you for tuning in to Trending Docket. If Barbara's courage moved you, like, subscribe, and share to keep these stories alive. Drop a comment. What's the most harrowing survival tale you've heard?